Writing for me it's a very lonely part of the process, and I don't usually write with other people, and I usually do veer between crushing self-doubt and an overwhelming sense of triumph when I think, oh, I really hit it here with this scene. The biggest triumph is actually just finishing the damn thing, and that's when you really want to celebrate, when you finish the first draft. The hardest part for me is actually the first. Obviously, I think probably for most writers is the first page, the first just getting into it. But yeah, I'm always varying in between those worlds, but probably more on the crushing self-doubt side of things. One of the tricks I've learned though is to keep writing no matter what, and just to force yourself to write and write and write. And there might be times where I've no idea what I'm going to write, but I'll just like invent a couple of characters, maybe 2 or 3 characters, and I'll just make them talk for, I don't know, so it could be 10 pages of just dialogue, and most of it might be pretty crappy, but somewhere in there'll be some sort of nuggets, some little things that will be the seeds of a bigger idea. I like being at home. I don't like writing in cafes or anything, but if I have to, then it's just sort of wherever I am. If I know what I'm going to write, it could be anywhere, but I prefer to sit around in my house, and then if I get a block, then I'll go for a little walk around the house or just up and down the street and then come back in. But I need to be comfortable. So sometimes with the music I play when I'm writing, there'll be some of it will be thematic and have something to do with the film that I'm writing. Other things will just have like a key word, like they might be similar to the main character's name or something, or even it might just be songs about love. Often it doesn't even matter if they're like lyric heavy either. I don't get distracted by that. It's more just like hearing something going on for me. I really like. I developed my style of writing down all the beats and all of the different parts of the story before actually typing quite early on, because I realized that I didn't really know. I didn't know how to format scripts back when I started off, and when I first started screenwriting, it was like on Microsoft Word, and so I'd seen scripts from when I was an actor, but I didn't like, and so I'd use the spacebar to go all the way into the middle of the page. I didn't know about tab. So I was using the spacebar to get all the way there, and then type the character's name, and then like press enter the spacebar all the way there to start doing the dialogue. So they're really wonky, and so it took me a long time doing that, because I didn't know how to do that, but also I didn't really know what I was writing. Like I knew kind of what the characters were doing, but I got stuck on blank pages all the time, so I started just doing things by hand and writing all my dialogue by hand first. And so that's what, with all my short films, I'd write everything by hand, and then when I knew the structure and I knew when it was good, then I would start typing it out. When I'm writing, a lot of it I feel is just like a sort of like a guide, or like a suggestion of what the scene could be. But having said that, I do often, like, there'll be certain lines that there might be jokes, or there might be something that, like a couplet that has to be a certain way for it to work and for it to be funny, or for it to have the impact that I want. And then other things that have to remain set in stone are probably exposition things that they're there for a real reason. But apart from that, I'm very open to dancing around it a little bit more and exploring a better way, because I do think there's always a better way if you open yourself to it. A lot of Hunt for the Wilderpeople was all shot according to the script. There wasn't much room for improvising, because we had a short shoot and we were out in wintry conditions when we were shooting, and we sort of had to rush, and there wasn't a lot of time to just sit back and go, okay, let's just improvise now. So a lot of that was like we just stuck strictly to the script, and I actually quite enjoyed that, because in a lot of ways it was nice to commit to what I'd written and have faith that it would work. I think Boy was one of the hardest ones to write, because I was really trying to figure out so many characters and just trying to give people things to do in the film, where really it's actually quite a simple story about a kid waiting for his dad to come home. His dad comes home, his useless father, and then he the boy comes to that realization at the end of the film. So it's like, yeah, the real story is quite simple. So I needed to like figure out ways of keeping the audience engaged and making a real journey for the kid. And so I feel like that's one of my deeper films. It's got more layers, I think, to it than the rest of mine. The quickest thing I wrote was Eagle vs. Shark. I wrote that in a week. I found confidence. I mean, I can barely say the word confidence, but I found the confidence in my comedic voice through testing out my stuff in front of audiences and doing a lot of stand-up and sketches and things, and then developing that over the years and finding my voice, but also finding my audience and finding like what people responded to that I was doing, and making sure that it was stuff that I enjoyed doing. Like I didn't want to find my comedic voice and, you know, be doing like, you know, nothing against Benny Hill, but like, you know, imagine if that was my thing, people loved that, but I wasn't in love with it, you know, and I was forced to do that style, which it's my style is so, I think, very specific to me, and a lot of my style is actually not even comedy. It's just sort of kind of weird light art, light drama in a way. So, you know, so if you look at a lot of my films, there's not a lot that. A lot of the time, it's not full of jokes. You know, there's like you might have 10, 15 minutes of the film where nothing funny happens, and it's just really sad. Usually, the ends of my films are really sad. So I found my voice was a mixture of those two, trying to find a balance between that comedy and that drama. They used to make fun of comedy. Well, they used to dismiss it because, you know, it's just a silly film about silly ideas. But I know that my films are about very important things, and you know, and they've got deeper themes in them. And you know, my Hunt for the Wilderpeople is about the foster care system in New Zealand, and Boy is about child neglect and raising children and families. All my films are about families. You know, I mean, in some ways you could say What We Do in the Shadows is about wasting time, and about how humans just waste time and they don't live their lives to the fullest. And even if you're an immortal, you'd still, having been a human, you'd still just waste that time and not do anything. And it's also about immigration, and it's about people who live on the outskirts and live in the margins. So yes, all of my films, I think, do touch on something that's quite important, but on the surface, they kind of seem just like ridiculous films about nothing. So my friends and I did used to get a bit of shit from people about, you know, the way that we were telling stories, but we never hear from them now. It's a bit of a luxury to come in and do passes on someone else's script, because they've done all the hard work, and you get to come in and just do tonal changes and write dialogue and put in jokes or add characters. But there's nothing nicer than, for a writer, than coming in, for me actually at least, than coming into something that's already been written and just getting to put my stamp on it, rather than, you know, page one writing, which is, that's the real hard work. And a lot of the time I like to find things that seem dangerous to me in a way, that I'm not like crazy enough to look for things that will end my career, but like things that feel like I will be nervous for most of the time that I'm making it, because I'm unsure if it's a good idea for me to do it or not. For instance, this film I'm doing at the moment, Jojo Rabbit, I think it's a good film. I know it's a good film, but I've always been nervous about it, because it's, you know, it's dealing with things that that are kind of risky for filmmakers to deal with. I find that taking the risks you reap bigger rewards from that. And if I feel like I'm playing it safe, or I'm too complacent and a bit too comfortable doing something, then I feel like my work suffers. And it's happened a couple of times, just on like, sort of, not even in film, but like in general life, just feeling like the easy way ultimately becomes the hard way, because you end up paying a price, which is, you know, you basically just make mediocre work. So I find like kind of, you know, you kind of force yourself to walk into the fire a bit, and you're on your toes and you're kind of you're just trying to survive constantly, then you come up with really great new ideas, and you come up with more inventive solutions to the problems. For me, I know how good something can be when I've shot it, but the problem for me is my writing isn't strong enough that it can usually convey that sense to someone who's reading it, who's not in my head and who's not seeing the final film. So I know, okay, well, maybe the scene isn't it's descriptive enough of the world or whatever it is, even though in my head I know what it is. I write for myself as a director, so I don't really need to do that. I know what the locations are like, and I know what these characters are like, so I can keep things really simple in terms of the way that I tell the story, knowing that I'm going to make it richer and deeper and more full when I shoot it and edit it and deliver it. For me, it helps just having really great HODs, people, like really great production designers or DPs, or people who know my work enough to believe that it'll be good, and not have to see it on the page, but can decipher enough of how I've written something to be able to complement that with what they're doing. When I'm casting, I think a little bit about an actor's ability to improvise or how they might perform comedy, but I try not to let that influence me too much, because usually my characters are never just comedy characters, the main ones at least. Also, I don't tend to encourage improvising a lot when I make films, because I feel like a lot of people are pretty bad at it, and a lot of actors like to think they're good at improvising, but they're not. Trying to be as honest and truthful and authentic to yourself, that's when things are funny. When people who try to be funny and they aren't funny, that's a disaster usually. But when people try and do the lines as serious as they can, being themselves, then I think that for me is always hilarious. If I went back and was able to talk to younger me and give myself some advice, it wouldn't really be about career or film, or it depends on how young I was. If I went back and talked to 17-year-old me or 16-year-old me, maybe I'd go back and give them the ideas for films like Reservoir Dogs and things like that, and just say, go make this really fast. I guarantee it's going to be good. But then it would be in New Zealand, and so it would have been shit back then. So sort of Reservoir Cats. I would tell myself to buy a house back in early 2000s before everything went mental.